Welcome to the Maverick podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Rose, and as usual, I love to give a big shout out to all the free spirits out there, all the independent thinkers, all the Mavericks in the world. Thank you for listening. Today we have a great guest. He's been on several times before on this podcast. His name is Pete Sanders Jr., and we are going to talk about an exciting new children's book he has that's teaching a particular spiritual technique. So come on board, Pete.
Thank you for having me, Kathy, and I enjoy sharing with all of your wonderful Maverick listeners and viewers.
It's great to have you back. Now, let me just give a little intro to those who may not have listened to the podcast with Pete in the past. He is the founder and the president of an organization called Free Soul, which is a nonprofit, tax-exempt educational program. I have been involved with Free Soul since 1983, teaching the concepts and the techniques. I'm a big believer, a big fan of the purpose of Free Soul, which is to teach people to teach themselves, teach them to be open to their spiritual gifts. So thanks for being on board. Let's talk about the Joy Touch and talk about the children's book.
So, in many ways, the name of our organization is the gateway to everything we're going to talk about, the freedom to live life as a soul with all the happiness and joyous journey you deserve, rather than living a life of survival struggle. Now, the Access Your Brain's Joy Center book, which was my book for adults, basically teaches lost physiology with an advancement. They actually found a brain center that you can either put electrodes in, which they did for a decade, for people who had a lot of trouble with anxiety or really deep sadness. But what I did is, why have the $80,000 expense and invasiveness of electrode implantation if we can teach you where these fibers are in the head relatively easily and self-trigger them with mind, body, and meditation techniques like strumming a harp? And basically what happened was I had a lady come to one of my scientific vortex information talks in Sedona, Arizona, where I'm based, not interested in really the vortexes that much, but because she's heard that some of the techniques I teach in that were great for stress reduction, for lowering blood pressure, for just being happier in life. And she bought a copy of the Access Your Brain's Joy Center book, which is the complete thing for adults, went back home. She was in her early 30s, very high stressful marketing tech job. And she called me a week later and said, "This is amazing. This technique of how to trigger these fibers, it's lowering my anxiety level. I can do better creative thinking. Gosh, I wish I had known this as a child. Have you ever considered doing a children's book?" So that got us started about 6 months ago on taking a story from her life, getting it illustrated by a wonderful illustrator who did the painting behind me, by the way, depicting how, if Alice had known this technique back during some of her early, very stressful childhood years, life would have been so much easier. And we just got it back from the printer in time for, the holidays, a great Christmas gifts for parents and grandparents. But it's called Alice Makes an Amazing Discovery. And these nerve fibers are in an area of the brain called the septum pellucidum. And aside from giving a mood boost, they also lessen the anxiety and unhappiness created by the limbic system of our brain, what I just shorten as the limbic brain. And so the story is Alice's, the brain science, mind-body discovery is mine. But this beautiful illustrator, I think, makes the book because of the way she depicted the limbic warriors. You can see them up there. And the septum soothers as the clouds. So it's teaching kids in a very easy way how to trigger those fibers and quiet the distressing negative inner voices of their limbic worriers and activate their septum soothers.
Let's take this step by step and break it down for a second, because not all people will know what the limbic brain is. So can you define the limbic part of our brain?
For keeping it simple, brain science sometimes refers to what they call the triune brain, the three levels of the brain. What most of us think of as the brain is the outer cortex. The deepest part of the brain is the pure fight or flight. You see a rattlesnake and you run. The limbic system in the middle, is worse than fight or flight. It's like if you saw a documentary about rattlesnakes, and because of that, you were afraid for the rest of your life to go out on a trail, or even if you were outside in a Western state that has rattlesnakes, you were, where's the rattlesnake? So you're not able to relax. And I can do, I feel like a game show, name that song, but name that movie. I can do a musical, just tonal soundtrack, and people will know what I'm referring to. What movie is this from? Da-da, 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 da-da. Jaws. We're supposedly have less of a chance of getting bitten by a shark than we do of being hit by lightning, or the fun one I heard recently was of being killed by a cow. But the amount of apprehension that was generated by that movie about going to the beach or doing scuba someplace. And that's really the limbic brain. Now, there's all kinds of different layers and triggers: anticipatory anxiety, afraid of what might happen, stresses in life. But we have this thing because in our evolutionary past, we were more survivable, miserable than happy. If you went walking through the meadow, in cave person times, isn't life great? Something would make you lunch. And in many ways, we're actually more prone to having that limbic brain triggered now than we were in our evolutionary past, because now we have TV channels showing us hurricanes in Florida, fires in California, blizzards in Buffalo, and this thing.
Mm-hmm.
In our evolutionary past, if you were a young female who wasn't liked by the other females in the tribe, maybe going to be very attractive, jealousies, whatever, you could be left behind or kicked out and died. Does that give you an idea why a teenage girl can feel suicidal if some idiot doesn't like them on Facegram?
Facegram.
Yeah, I just shortened it. And the male version of this, if Will Smith knew the discovery in the adult book for how to trigger these mood elevation fibers,
good point. Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't be banned from the Oscars for 10 years. And
Mm-hmm.
and if you saw the show, he initially laughed at the joke, but then he looked at his wife and she's giving him this, and that triggered kind of the limbic reflex of, I gotta protect my joke is if he knew this discovery, or even many adults from reading the book to kids tell me they can trigger the fibers from even the simpler explanation. If he had known that, he would have said, Jada, he has to pee sometime. We'll beat the heck out of him in the bathroom, not in front of 10 million viewers.
Jeez. Well, the point is, you have come up with an action step people can take. Now, when we talk about the Maverick mentality and the Maverick personality, what I always highlight, and the reason I started this podcast to begin with, is the personality type that says, I'm going to do something to fix this. I'm going to take charge. I'm going to think outside the box. I'm not going to be a victim. I'm going to be creative. That's the Maverick energy. And so this technique really opens the door for that, because you have an action step to be in control of your state of mind, or be in command of your state of mind. You can do something, and it's not waiting for somebody outside to do it for you. It is taking responsibility and doing it yourself, which is, and I've done the joy technique for many, many years. It's really, really powerful, and it's easy. That's the other thing. It is so easy. It's basically sending energy into the part of your brain, which is in the upper forehead, the upper part of the brain.
It's about mid forehead level.
Mm-hmm.
And, the main thing is that Mavericks don't want to be sheep. They don't want to just be using what someone who wants to make a buck wants to have them used to soothe limbic distress. I was lecturing in Denver on this, and this doctor in the front row goes, "What an amazing discovery. Such a shame it's not going to go anywhere, and it's definitely not going to make you any money." And I said, "Well, money's not my prime mover, but that's why I founded my organization as a nonprofit public ed. But why are you saying that?" And he goes, "Well, duh, Mr. MIT. When you teach people where those fibers are and how to trigger them for themselves, they don't need you anymore. The real money is in a product that they have to keep buying." And interesting fact, nicotine soothes limbic brain, particularly the part of limbic distress of anxiety and worry. And that's why vaping is absolutely running through teenagers,
Mm-hmm.
and why people smoked for decades after we knew it could be harmful. That's the power of the limbic brain. And we can't get a lumpectomy. We got stuff in life that's going to trigger it. But Mavericks say, I don't want to be controlled by that dinosaur evolutionary past part of my brain.
Yes.
I want the freedom to live life as a joyous journey soul, not a survival struggle cave person.
Clearly illustrating the name of the organization, Free Soul. In order to be free, you need to have techniques that you can apply, and you need to have the motivation to do so. So you're really taking responsibility. The Joy Touch technique, I've taught it for years, because the book came out back in 92 or something, 93,
the early 90s.
Yeah. And it is available on the Free Soul website, freesoul.net. And within the book is not only talking about the technique, but talking about self-comforting, self-soothing, and a lot of deep spiritual concepts. So the book is really worth getting. So is this children's book. If you want to read it out loud to a child, as you read it out loud, I guarantee you're going to be doing it yourself. Not only because you have the visual part, you're seeing those wonderful colored pictures, the illustrations, but because you're going to be saying it out loud, and as you hear it, you're going to be doing it.
And here's the reason this is so crucial. I know you speak a lot about how we're ingrained in habits, and we can, as Mavericks, choose to change our habits, rise above them. Think of how much kids learn things easier. That, the best example is a second language. Adults can learn to speak a second language later in life, but it's harder. Whereas if kids are exposed to it early, they just pick it up so much quicker. And they have the ability then to have the lifelong benefits of it, because it becomes an automatic habit, not just triggering the fibers, recognizing when something limbic is happening, or in the kids' book version, that's the limbic warriors trying to just have you default to the negative side, to see the thorns on the rose, not the rose itself. I mean, life has thorns.
Yeah. Now let me interject something right here, because what you said is recognizing when it is starting. This is something I talk a lot about in my astrology consultations when I'm dealing with people who have anxiety or fears, is I suggest to them to get a journal and to write down what is triggering this anxiety response or the fear or the depression, what triggers it, and then how does your body start to react, and write it down so that you know, is it your breathing that changes? Do you get a clenched stomach? Do you get tense all over your body? And really truly understand what your pattern or habit or reaction is, and then form a habit disruptor, a habit changer, which would be this joy touch. Take a deep breath and then send this energy into that part of the brain, soothe those septum fibers. But recognizing it, you need to have alarm bells going off when the first hint, and I like to say catch it at level 1 rather than let it go to level 10, where it's much harder, so you do a preventative joy touch soothing early.
And, we teach kids all kinds of things like that. Here's the simplest example. We teach them to wash their hands when they're outside playing in the mud. This part of the brain is there. It has valid uses as a warning light, but when it warns us about perceived dangers that may not really be there, or keeps us worrying, like the dun 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 dun, okay, that's not helpful in life. So we teach kids early on, okay, if something happens, you just wash your hands. Well, this is like mental cleansing from anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And the neat thing about it is that kids then know there is a big, complicated medical name for all this. Normal. That you've got this, but you don't have to let it dominate your life. And I can see it initiating discussions between kids and parents. Mommy, my limbic worriers came up when I had this happen with, Rachel, or when I was a little afraid, going, because parents can't always be it with kids. Once you drop them off at kindergarten, whole chunks of time, you're not seen. And if the kids don't feel free to talk about this, they come, how was school? Fine.
Mm-hmm.
And this may provide an avenue that allows conversations, and where parents can share with children, well, I had this thing in my day where the limbic worriers were howling really loud, and I remembered, and it can bring a whole mental wellness instruction simply.
And it always begins with what the parents are modeling. So if the parents can start to do this technique, or to be aware of what triggers them, and to be aware of their reaction to worry or fear or the limbic brain response, then they model that to the children. And if the parents can remember, take a deep breath and hold on, I need to calm the limbic worriers, whatever words you want to use, then the children get to see how to do it. So this book, again, reading it out loud to a child is just so important. And, kids watch everything we do. They listen to every word we say. Now that my kids are older and I'm seeing things they're doing, I'm realizing, oh, wow, they're modeling the exact behavior I showed them. You think it's not sticking, but, they get older and then you see it. So it's so important for us to model the ability to soothe and to regroup and to change the habit too, which is why both books are good. Accessing the Brain's Joy Center, your book for the adults, and then this children's book. But the children's book is a great gift. It's available.
It's wonderful for grandparents too, because, there are so many extra stresses when there are children. But grandparents, we get a second chance to go back and maybe introduce things to the grandkids that are life or stresses we didn't have. And, the nice thing is people can order it from the freesoul.net website as a print copy, a digital download, or if they're watching this from overseas, where, overseas shipping is just these days, digital download alone. And the main thing is the digital download alone has no shipping costs added.
Right.
Someone can order the print copy and the digital download for the same price as just the print copy. And, that may be helpful if they have family who is overseas. Or they can get extra books and then put them in a Christmas package that they're sending off shortly overseas or whatnot. But I'm very excited about, in many ways, Christmas is a holiday of hope, regardless of your faith. It's a season of hope. And this book is a lesson of hope that you can learn skills, not just philosophies. Philosophies are good, but when physiology is triggering you into unhappiness, that you can use scientifically based physiological skills for having more hope, more joy in how you approach even the challenging things you have to do.
Yeah, substance-free and electrode-free technique, using pure energy. So it's free. You carry it with you everywhere you go, and all it takes is a choice. Yeah.
And the reason I say it's lifelong, people may have heard the term emotional intelligence, and it was based on a Harvard study done years ago where they tracked kids from a very early age and then how they went into adulthood. And they found if they scored higher on EQ skills, later in life, they had less divorce, actually went further in their careers, had more happiness in life. And one of the EQ skills is, can you soothe yourself when you become distressed?
Mm-hmm.
And since life is life and it's messy and there's always going to be things that can distress us, knowing that EQ skill not only is important for happiness, but for success in whatever your field of endeavor is, for better creative thinking, for better being able to be calm and emotionally present when you're caring for an ill relative or dealing with a pain in the butt boss, or, it's literally has benefits on so many levels. We probably can't even cover them all. And that's why, we do say for adults, if you like this, you're probably going to want to get the Access Your Brain's Joy Center book, because chapter 1 teaches step by step for adults how to trigger the fibers and the history of the physiology. Chapter 2 has 60 pages of things that can flash people limbic, and a second technique with each type of hurt, each type of worry. And, the thing that I thought was really wise is we put at the very back of the book a chapter on quick reference guides. Because when you're really in limbic, you don't want to try and find in 60 pages, what was that story from somebody's life on how I soothed that type of loneliness or that type of anger. And being able to just flip to the quick reference guide for comforting connections for each type of hurt, each type of worry, that can be invaluable if you're counseling a child. Where the child says, I had this upset. You can just, boom, go to that and say, okay, was that an anger, a hurt, a worry, a fear? What's some of the keys? And then put it in words that will work for them. So you can tell I'm very passionate about the potential benefits of how we can help children have a better world. And really, that's what we want for our children.
Well, it's something I bring up quite often in astrology consultation, because there are a few planetary patterns that you can see in the horoscope that suggest that perhaps you weren't comforted or nurtured in the way that you needed when you were a child. And astrology can show this. And when I see that in a client's chart and I ask, the suggestion here is maybe you weren't comforted or nurtured in the way that you needed, they just, it's like the dam breaks, and they talk about, yeah, that's exactly right. Because parents tend to comfort in the way that works for them, but it may not work for their child. They may need a different way. So one of the things I ask people is, have you learned to comfort and nurture yourself? And it is amazing to me. People who have been in therapy for years and years and years have said, no one has ever asked me that. I've never thought about that. And I said, different soothing, comforting techniques for different situations. If I'm really mad, I'm going to need a different comforting, soothing technique than if I'm really sad, or if I'm exhausted, or if I'm in pain. All of those require different soothing techniques. And thinking about that needs to be part of our paradigm, I think. I mean, starting it when you're young, and even just saying to a child, what would make you feel better right now? Of course, I would probably say ice cream every single time. But besides ice cream, what might make you feel better right now?
And getting the essence of that, well, a treat or feeling special. Yes, the ice cream was always nice, but when grandma or grandpa took me to get the ice cream, I felt special. I felt loved. And, this should be a no-brainer, but we teach kids when they head off in the world, play nice with others. We don't teach them how to play nice with themselves.
Exactly.
How to be kind to themselves. And
it is sorely lacking in our culture to do that. And it begins and ends with that. And of course, again, I go back to saying, are the parents modeling that? Do the parents model that when they're upset, they can say to their kids, hold on, I need a moment to regroup. I'm just having a bad moment here, and let the kids watch the parent do that, because then the kids learn how to do it themselves. Yeah.
And, I want to go back to something you said, because I think Amanda Wallace, who was the illustrator for this book, I just giving her praise, because her depiction of the limbic warriors, and they really, you can't see it on the screen. I mean, we'll see if we can get a separate picture that can be included, but each of the three limbic warriors has a different face.
Right.
One has kind of an angry face, one has a worried face. And you know how much kids pick things up. They'll see that there are different things. And it builds that recognition that, those are all emotions I'm going to feel. What do I do about it?
That's the key. What do I do about it? You are in charge of your own state of mind. You get to choose how you feel, and you get to do something when you're upset, as opposed to, there's a lot of programming that goes around that says blame the other person, or feel victimized, feel helpless. And this is the opposite of that. The Maverick mentality says, no, never feel helpless. Find techniques, find skills. Let's just briefly describe a little bit more of how to do the joy touch. The book is really important, the Access Your Brain's Joy Center book. But the easy way to explain it is that you're just basically sending a stream of energy up through that upper part of your forehead into the center part of your brain. And it's a flow of energy.
I'm going to go a little bit nerd on you for a moment and then expand out to say, once you know where these fibers are, there's many different ways to do it. Many people like the flow of energy. And we did decide on that illustration for children because it's the easiest to just adapt. But I'll try and do this in a short version, because it's almost criminal to me that nothing's been done for this for decades.
Yeah.
In World War I, they learned the gateway to this discovery. They found that people who were shot in the head and lived. Now, you're shot in the head, you got problems. But if they had damage anywhere near this area of the brain called the septum pellucidum, they always, in addition to whatever physical movement or other challenges they had from being shot in the head, they developed the condition the doctors call anhedonia, inability to experience feelings of joy or pleasurableness in life. You would think that would cause somebody to go, what the heck is there? Nothing. For decades. Finally, after 40 plus years, Dr. Robert Heath at Tulane University Medical School said, I wonder what's there. Now, he found it was mostly a fluid-filled sac, that septum pellucidum area. That'll be important in a moment. The discovery that got him promoted to be the dean of Tulane University Medical School was that the front of that fluid-filled sac are where these nerve fibers are, like harp strings. And that those nerve fibers connected to the same spot in the hypothalamus that was known to be a major mood elevation center of the brain. He didn't stop there. He did a decade of fully documented, not experiments, treatment for severely depressed or anxious people. He would surgically implant at a cost of $80,000 in today's money, permanent electrodes connect into those fibers, connected to a battery pack, like a pacemaker for the brain. And when people had regular pulses, they came out of their depression, they could function happily in life, and people have never heard about that. His work fell off the face of the planet and was forgotten because of the discovery of LSD. LSD totally changed brain science from electrodes to drugs. You know, they always say anything you see on the internet, no offense to you, Kathy, but fact check. You can get your smartphone or your computer right now and Google Dr. Robert Heath, septum pellucidum, and you'll find everything I just told you and more. That's the physiology this is based on. Mm-hmm. And I'm just cheap. I don't want the $80,000 expense or the invasiveness of electrode implantation or the side effects of alcohol, tobacco, nicotine, or overeating for soothing. And I said, why don't we just teach people how to trigger those fibers with mind body? Many people like the flow of energy. I a lot of times say you're strumming a harp, but this one student I had who was a sign painter, he said, oh, I just take my best brush and I go in there and tickle them. Mm-hmm. So the nice is choices. People have different ways they can do it, but it gives them the freedom to do for themselves. And to give them an idea of what it's like, if you've ever felt how the weight lifts off your shoulders when you get a piece of good news or a ray of hope about something, that's what it's like when these fibers are triggered. So you know the brain can create that feeling, but it doesn't have to be dependent on an external thing. And if you've ever noticed how soothing a rocking chair is, mm-hmm. When you rock, you actually, remember fluid-filled sac? Rock that fluid against those fibers, and you get, for most people, about 1/10 to maybe 1/4 of the feel and effect you can get when you really learn to trigger them with mind-body. And that's why we rock babies.
You were just reading my mind, because I was going to talk about my favorite way to trigger it is rocking. Sit in my rocking chair. And that's why I enjoyed rocking my kids to sleep every night, telling them a story, or swinging. When I was really young, mm-hmm. I would walk over to the school and I would swing for 2 to 3 hours. I had an intense childhood, and childhood was filled with a lot of stress and a lot of unhappiness. And so I found a way to soothe, which was just go swing for mm-hmm. hours. And now I know what that was doing.
Of how that works.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And, and think about autistic children who rock. And, I've thought about that. That's as a self-comforting technique. Now, I'm not a scientist. Maybe there's more to it than that. But I know that it's probably triggering that septum pellucidum, the fluid-filled sac, and creating some soothing.
Because a lot of autism is an oversensitivity, overstimulation. So that soothing helps kind of dial that down. Here's another one. People have heard of EMDR, mm-hmm. which is eye movement reprocessing and desensitization. It is very hard to get the VA to approve something officially as a VA. And the VA has approved that technique. Mm-hmm. Now, for decades, therapist said, follow my finger. And then they found that it could be, it didn't have to be totally visual. It could be what's called bilateral brain shifting focus. So they could have people hold paddles that pulse, 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 or earbuds. Well, when people know where these fibers are, they can do that bilateral energy flow at the spot of those fibers, and they get an even deeper level of PTSD relief. And I do have programs, I just want to mention, for vets. I've taught this at the Truman VA Hospital. We have a lot of things we do to help vets and first responders, but just giving people an idea that this is brain science that in some ways, I don't want to go conspiracy theory, but has been withheld from them. Or you could just say what that doctor said, the make a buck, sell a product version. And it's like anything else. It's, yeah, it takes practice to learn it. Not as much practice as it took you to learn to read or to ride a bike. But I think because there wasn't something like this, people defaulted to external substances that made other people money at the expense of your health.
Well, it does take practice, but it's a very simple technique. And even more than practice, I think it just simply takes a choice, and it takes the knowledge of what to do. I choose to feel better, and I choose to be in charge of my state of mind. So I choose to activate this rather than, and that's what it boils down to. Are you choosing not to change your state of consciousness right now if you know the technique? So the choice is a big part of it.
And awareness. See, because if someone's not aware, every kid should be taught in school about the limbic brain. And that this is the part. And I gotta, by the way, give a shout out to anybody who's doing good work. I want to give a shout out. We all know Goldie Hawn as a comedian, wonderful comedian and actress, but she's had a mental health foundation for over 3 decades. And her children's program went digital recently, and it's called mindup.org. And it's good philosophy and additional techniques for helping children. And what she says is, kids, the amygdala, which is a major part of the limbic system, creates a lot of anxiety and anger, is like the barking dog. And the prefrontal cortex is the wise old owl that wants to learn. And when the barking dog is, but the wise old owl can't learn. So we're going to take a brain break. We're going to sit down and we're going to pet the barking dog. And, a lot of schools are finding that teaching mindfulness meditation is helping kids who are distracted learners. And, the nice thing about this technique, the way it's depicted in the book, is if a child is not in a school that does that, they have something they can do. Now, we show it initially with her actually using her hand and imagining that energy. But once she knows how to do it, you then see her in the final part of the books being able to do it without even being obvious in a class, feeling comfortable asking questions, or in family gatherings, or in all kinds of new adventures.
And that's the beauty of the technique. And that's where it can go. You can imagine, one of the things I've done is to imagine a spinning wheel of energy, like a water wheel of energy, just flowing through that septum pellucidum, coming from the universe into the forehead and back up.
And that's where we come back to, choices. The fact that there are different times where some people like one version rather than another, but knowing that spot, knowing it has a physiological basis. I mean, in some ways, we know more about space than we do about all the wiring of the brain, or even the dimensions beyond that superstrings physics says we exist in. And, the biggest example of that is the placebo effect. No drug can be approved for use here in America, unless in trials it is 25% more effective than the placebo sugar pill. And people go, oh, that's just the placebo effect. Well, it's amazing. The body can do 25% just in belief and hope. And then if you add something that is known physiology or known biochemistry, it can do even more.
Yes,
And I just want
absolutely.
to say, this also has pain control aspects. I'm always hesitant to tell too much about family, but it's a true story I got to tell. My grandson is very active, and he had a freak accident at about four or five at a skateboard park, which fortunately was totally recorded on camera, so it wasn't any one person's liability. But that freak fall broke his femur completely in half, and he had to have the surgery where you put a bar, you know, and his mom really doesn't like medication, and he kind of absorbed that from her, and so he wasn't even taking children's Tylenol. And in the hospital, I taught him how to trigger those fibers to help with pain control. And the next day, when he came home from the hospital, still not even willing to take children's Tylenol from this very invasive surgery, he woke up in pain at night and he said, Mommy, where are those fibers Poppy taught me about? And she re-described it to him. And again, kids do things so easily. And he triggered them and went back to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the most important thing is the wellness and happiness, but this is just one other use of knowing that as a skill.
Well, I can give my personal testimonial on the pain part because I've had both of my hips replaced. And the first hip, I was in pain, and it was close to level 10 pain for about 5 years because I'm too stubborn to go to the doctor, for one thing. Another thing is I didn't have insurance. I was trying to heal it myself. And meanwhile, it was bone on bone. It was extremely painful. And I was still very active, but the pain was excruciating most days. And it was the joy touch and breathing and awareness and mindfulness and blending techniques that helped me still function and still be physical. At the time we were living on an acre surrounded by woods, and I would have to blow leaves in the fall, sometimes 3 hours, 2 or 3 times a week, with a bad hip at level 10 pain. And I was able to do it as long as I continued that joy touch technique. So I can absolutely say it was extremely helpful with that. And when pain gets to be that bad, you do look for some way to relieve it. You look for a way. You're motivated to do that.
And people don't realize that pain triggers a limbic depression. In the
Absolutely.
evolutionary past, if we were injured, we were better off in the cave hiding and healing than out trying to fight the next saber-toothed tiger.
Yeah.
So when people have pain, they don't realize that it also triggers this limbic withdraw, feel cloistered. They think, oh, that's just because I'm in pain. And the nice thing, again, for grandparents who may get this, I want a copy at my house to read to them when they come over, is if we can, for at least any grandparents that might be listening to this, knowing that once you cross 60, cross 70, we got a lot of mini broken stuff.
Yes.
And I think the reason they call seniors the gray panthers is not this stuff. It's the heaviness they have from dealing with their aches and pains that they didn't have in their 30s. So any grandparents or future grandparents watching this, when you're reading it to the child, you can be doing it too, and it can help you with, not feeling you have to be burdened by what is normal physically.
Exactly. Well, congratulations for the pioneering children's book that is going to be so incredibly helpful to so many. I know a lot of my clients and my social media friends have already purchased it, and they're looking forward to getting it. And I wish you the very best in this. And, you deserve a huge hug for putting this out there, because it's a beautiful beautiful gift to humanity. And,
Well,
we're moving more towards inner technology, spiritual
Sure.
technology, and this is just at the forefront of it.
And I want to comment on that, but first, I know people probably saw it. It's 8.5 by 11
Mhm.
with great, full color illustrations, and makes it very easy for kids to read to themselves as they get to reading age. But I really see this as a team project. We were a triumvirate bringing this to birth. I had the brain science discovery. Alice had the story from her life, and Amanda Wallace did the beautiful illustrations. And we are now passing the baton to all you Mavericks out there who feel that kids deserve better, that the world deserves better, because we're just the ones who did the first part of getting this out there. You have the chance to spread the word. Whether you never get a book or not, you can go to the Facebook link that Kathy did about it, or our website, and click the link for the page. We can do something easy to help make the world a better place. And I encourage you to join us in that effort.
So again, the website freesoul.net. And one thing we didn't mention, just in closing, soon it will be translated into Spanish.
We probably, even by the time this podcast comes on, the Spanish language edition with the same illustrations, but translations, will be available via Kindle. We won't have a print version. And I do want to just say, because we are a 501c3 nonprofit, we're the same status as the Red Cross or anyone. If someone says, well, I really don't have a need for the book, but I want to support this effort, they can go to our website and make a donation of any size and know that it will help with the printing costs and outreach, and every little bit we will gladly take that assistance and partnership.
Well, here's the vision that I am energizing. It's a little bit of a future vision, but I'm energizing it. I'm seeing ahead. I'm imagining that in children's hospitals, this book is going to be available. And as a child is in there, maybe getting chemotherapy or some sort of a treatment, they can read it. It'll be there.
So send us on the freesoul.net is a contact button. Send us links or reach out and link to them, and know that we'd be happy to send donated copies to hospitals. The other thing I've thought of, God bless Dolly Parton. She does so much wonderful work for the world. And I know she's going to do even more with the $100 million grant her foundation just got from Jeff Bezos. If anybody has connections there and knows how we can send a copy, because she has that program where they send free books to kids. Anybody knows how to reach out in a way that the thing isn't just thrown in the trash, we'd love to know about it.
Mm-hmm.
We're just excited to get the word out and the joy out.
Wonderful. Thanks again, Pete, for coming on board. freesoul.net. Order the book. Alice makes an amazing discovery. And till we meet again, we'll have you back on, I'm sure, in the future. Bye for now.
Thank you for having me on the show, Kathy.